good evening, good afternoon. I hope you're having a wonderful day. We got another reaction coming to you today. The Secrets of Yosemite. There we go. All right, we're not gonna waste any time. Let's go ahead and get in this. It's coming from What Lurks Beneath. This is gonna be a banger. I hope you guys enjoy.
And kind of sat there and swayed side to side as it was looking at her. And even though it didn't have eyes, she could feel that this thing was staring into her soul. In tonight's episode, we're going to look into the secrets Yosemite has been hiding all these years. Get ready. In June of 2011, Jessica Andreas and her family would find themselves camping inside the beauty of Yosemite National Park. Jessica, only being 22 years old at this time, had never really been hiking or to any national parks before, and so this being her first experience, she was a little on edge being in the outdoors, which is when 3 days later, after the family had settled into their campsite, Jessica had reported to one of the park rangers that she felt watched during the night and believed there were several individuals watching her family and her from the trees, casing her campsite. While this information was written down, I don't think he took it too seriously and did not seem to investigate further. Whether it be negligence, incompetence, or disbelief, we're not too sure. This day, which happened to be the third day, Jessica seemed genuinely distressed about the situation and really reiterated to the ranger that she really felt that someone was watching her campsite and he should look to it. Her claim as well is that it was becoming a nightly occurrence since camping there. Unfortunately, the request would go ignored. A couple of days after this, so 5 total days since the family arrived in Yosemite, and Jessica Andreas is deemed missing by her family. A search party sets out by the early evening, and within hours, they find her remains
last time they saw
right
her?
near Royal Arch Creek. Jessica Andreas was reportedly brutally murdered inside Yosemite National Park. Her killing would prove to be gruesome, her head being found on a tree stump nearby, the head appearing to have been torn off the body, eyeballs missing and tongue ripped out, and her body completely torn to shreds. Police had believed it to be the work of a cult killing, and not that of any wild animal. The case in and of itself is very bizarre when you look at the details. There's what appears to be a massive cover-up on this case due to the supposed negligence by the ranger looking into Jessica's suspicions of people potentially wanting to harm her and her family. But there's also theories that the family has a lot to do with it. What I personally find very strange about this case is that she did not go missing on paper until around 4 or 5 p.m. in the afternoon, but her family had talked about her being missing all day, but they just waited around to report it, which seems very fishy and very odd to me. Supposedly so, the entire Andreas family were forced to sign NDAs or non-disclosure agreements based on the details of what happened. So we have either a few things going on. We have the actual death of Jessica and the manner in which she died, which is very strange and horrendous, and goes in line with a lot of the other strange national park stories that I've talked about and that are all over the internet circulating. People being found dead in very mysterious, horrendous ways, torn apart, ripped apart, you name it. And at the same time, her family acted very suspicious about her death, like not reporting her missing for almost 8 hours. The park ranger who had completely blown off her legitimate concerns about people watching and casing her family's camp, and that she felt in danger, and the way the police handled things, closing everything up, and personally, I'm not sure what to make of the story myself. I think her family might have had a part to play in her death, but I can't be too sure. But then you take into account the manner in which she died, how she was torn into pieces.
That's a little crazy.
And then my mind always goes back into the realm
consider.
of supernatural, and I can't help but think, what were her last moments? What did she last see in terror as she died? Cult killings, as this was written off as, are generally far more ritualistic. Most victims are killed in different manners, but this is just far too barbaric and so much extra carnage to be that of a cult killing. And the fact that it would have had to happen in broad daylight in the afternoon, since she'd only been dead for less than 8 hours when they found her, which makes this case not only mysterious, but makes it feel so much more supernatural. Trying to do some further research into this case proved extremely difficult, as Google failed to turn up any information on Jessica Andreas. In fact, digging deeper provided virtually nothing available. So the only information I was able to obtain is this picture of Jessica, and the information I've received about her case from an anonymous source. Could this case simply be the work of mere fiction, or is there a deeper cover-up to Jessica Andreas' death. Just as many previous park personnel have pointed out to me before, there is a conspiracy going on that they do not want the public to know about.
I believe it. I mean, that just sounds absolutely insane. I believe that.
This story was submitted to me by the
there's
friend
something
of
going
park
on there,
ranger.
obviously,
this
that they gotta be hiding.
Who wishes to remain anonymous or goes by the name Jill, still currently works as a park ranger in Yosemite National Park. And since this event back in 2015, it has affected her pretty badly. The experience has left her shaken and needing to seek therapy for a time being. One afternoon, while Jill was driving around the park, she was right around Chilnawalna Falls Trail when she passes two vehicles with their emergency flashers on. But as she passes by, she did not see anybody. Thinking she better stop and investigate, she pulls over her vehicle, stops, gets out, and goes and inspects. After inspecting the front vehicle, which appeared to have a major leak on the back side, which turned out to be gasoline, she noticed a presence coming from behind her. Initially, thinking it was maybe one of the drivers to the vehicles seeking help, she turned around to respond to the driver when, to her horror, she realized it was not the driver at all, but a being she can only describe as from another world. She said this thing was standing there about 5 feet away from her, right in the tree line, looking at her, but was not looking at her because the being she saw was almost a translucent white and apparently had no mouth, no eyes, or no nose, but had ears kind of like that of an elf, she described, very tall and pointed. And
what in the world was that looking at her? I don't even know what that could have been. Like, what would you say that was? That's so creepy. I mean, but all of this is happening in the same park, so it's like something's going on here and they don't want the public to know about it.
Sat there and swayed side to side as it was looking at her. And even though it didn't have eyes, she could feel that this thing was staring into her soul. And the amount of fear that she felt inside of her body was unlike anything she's ever experienced before. This is also a very hardy woman who's had several near-death experiences in her life, and nothing was as terrifying as this very moment. After being shocked, frightened, and stunned for a few seconds, she just turns to run towards her vehicle, where this thing chases after her, nearly catching up to her and grabbing her. As soon as she gets in her patrol vehicle, she goes to floor her vehicle, and this thing is pulling on the door handle, trying to get her out of the car. And as she speeds away, she looks in her side view mirror and sees this thing has completely disappeared. Overcome by panic, she stops back at the main station of the park, and as she gets out of her vehicle and goes to close her door, she touches the strange goopy liquid that's right on the outside of her door handle, completely validating her experience and forcing her to accept this was not just a dream, a nightmare, or a grand hallucination of some kind. The substance was sticky and snot-like, she described, but completely clear and never tested, for she feared ridicule. And even to this day, nearly 6 years later, she has not told a soul about it because she fears losing her job, being humiliated by colleagues, damaging her lifelong career in the forest industry and Yosemite, and even went on to tell her friend that there's this sort of code of conduct between rangers and personnel that everybody has weird experiences they can't explain. You just keep it to yourself. For the following 2 weeks after this, she would complain of severe burning, tingling sensations right in the part of her hand where she went to go close her vehicle door, where she touched and made contact with that strange liquid, right where that being had tried to open the door. And she said that there were days where her whole right hand would swell up and the part of her hand that touched the door would just burn and burn, but the pain would come and go. And finally, after a few weeks, it had completely subsided and never came back, but still very strange. She never did go to get help from a physician for fear that he would ask her and make her try to explain what had happened, fearing she had no way to explain it. The best way for her to handle this experience is to just shove it down deep and completely try and forget all about it. But after some time has passed and she's sought deep therapy, she's needed to come to terms with it. So
I don't think
she ended up confiding in a very close friend, this same friend who actually is sharing this story with me and with you guys, with the permission of Jill, of course. It just goes to show you that the Ranger Code of Conduct is more alive than ever before.
Yeah, and I feel, especially after the first story and now that one, like,
this story would be submitted to me by a former U.S. National Park Service employee having worked at Yosemite National Park from 1991 to 2004. This first incident shared with me took place in 1994 when they were assigned to the Tuolumne Meadows District, a more remote section of Yosemite which was accessed at the time by driving up Tioga Pass, followed by an older dirt road that led into the meadows. Other rangers at the time also complained of the isolation and the creepiness of these meadows. Part of his job description at the time involved him driving Tioga Pass Road from the west entrance all the way to the east, then up a very steep, narrow dirt road. And oftentimes this road was so narrow it required a high clearance vehicle, and on several occasions he would actually use his own truck. Once in the meadows, he had no other staff support for at least 30 miles past Hardin Lake. So we're talking about truly remote wilderness here. His job as a district ranger was to ensure the safety and well-being of all visitors, ensuring that all park regulations and rules were being followed. And because
definitely
it was
not
the summer,
somewhere you want to be
things
by
were
yourself.
a bit busier than normal. He had also dealt heavily in conducting bear management, which dealt very closely with campsites in which bears had become habituated to human food sources and helping prevent them become more of a nuisance. As far as his daily routine would go, he would usually start at about 3:30 in the morning, driving almost the entirety of Tioga Pass to the east side, where he would drive up this narrow dirt road that would lead him parallel right alongside Tenaya Lake. He would generally patrol this route all day long. These were very long days. They required a lot of very intense concentration due to the very dangerous terrain and the extremes of steep drop-offs and cliffs, but nothing would prepare him for what he had experienced. And he had already been doing this route for about 2 years by this point, and had ran into marmots, deer, all sorts of wildlife, plenty of black bear. So this one evening in 1994, he begins his shift like usual, although this night he would start on 9 p.m. And it was a very clear, beautiful night. The stars were out in full. It was July, so it was nice and warm. It was set to be a very typical run-of-the-mill evening shift. And as he begins his descent down Tioga Pass Road to Mono Lake, via another steep dirt road that leads down into the meadow of the western end of Tenaya Lake, he observed a very large black object flying in the sky. And as he sees this, the size alone is shocking to him, and he thinks to himself, since when do turkey vultures fly at night? But as he's going down the road, it's almost coming at a crossroads with him, and he's about to cross directly underneath it. And almost about right where they intersect, it opens its wings just as it goes above his vehicle, and he's able to get a full view of its wings. And that's when this man had several disturbing epiphanies all at once. The first is that this bird above him was not a bird, and was more like that of a bat. But the other is that it was far larger than any turkey vulture he's ever seen. The wings were very bat-like and leathery, and even had the fleshy membrane like bat wings do, while the body was more compact and shorter, as he described it, and reminded him of a very large hairy bat, probably the size of about a 7 or 8-year-old child. Even with the lighting conditions of the night, the moon was about half full, so he was able to get a pretty decent look at it, and may note that it was very lean, very slender, and had a longer neck. The head appeared disturbingly human. It actually deeply reminded him of images he'd seen of a gargoyle, or like some mythological creature. He cannot really determine a gender of the creature, but it appeared to have breasts. The overall impression was that this was a lean, gargoyle bat-like creature that was flying over his vehicle with a wingspan that reached longer than his truck, or well over 18 feet, seemingly impossible by reality standards. This is not something you'd ever expect to see in Yosemite, but he talked about how it moved very gracefully through the air and how it just sort of glided, the same way a bat would. After getting lost in a gaze of just staring at this creature and slowing down to fully take it in, this thing ascends up into the sky very quickly and then shoots off south and heads right towards Mono Lake. And he just sat there thinking to himself, did this really happen? Because it all happened so fast within a 30-second time frame. And immediately, he felt fear and uncertainty about what he was going to do about this. I mean, he can't tell anybody about this for fear of his job. And in fact, about a year prior to this, there had been an incident
back to that prior
in which a previous
clause
ranger
where the
claimed he had
rangers
an
can't
encounter with a
talk about
Sasquatch
anything
near Lake Tahoe and was ultimately ostracized from his job due to ridicule from staff, other employees, and their boss. And so he tells me that as somebody who deeply loves his job in the National Park Service, he would be devastated if his career met the same fate because of what he claimed he saw. He's not sure what he saw that evening, and it still boggles his mind to this day. As far as he's concerned, There's no such thing as gargoyles or giant flying bats living in the vicinity of California or Yosemite itself. The only way to truly come to terms with it is to accept that there are things out there we just don't understand. Things that venture beyond our understanding of the natural
absolutely
world.
Unbelievable.
While others might be interdimensional beings or potentially time travelers from other rifts of time who choose to not make themselves known for any number of reasons. Regardless, something had occurred here that evening which had permanently altered his perception of time and reality, and is convinced there are beings who many of us don't even know exist share this world with us. Along with this story, I've been given the request to not release his name and to keep him as anonymous as possible due to his previous employment status at Yosemite National Park. If you guys enjoyed this episode and had a great time watching it, be sure to hit that like button, leave a comment below, and if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe because I'm going to have a lot of great content coming your way. Everything.
That was absolutely insane. I definitely feel like these park rangers have an agreement. Don't talk about anything you see. It's kind of suspect. I wonder how many other things park rangers have seen throughout the years that they just don't talk to the public about. That's all for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you in the next one.